What's up, everyone? This is Mayan Gordon, owner of Mayan Gordon Media, owner of Monkey Boy Art, and joint venture owner with Champion Roundtable. We have a very special guest for you guys today. Her name is Brittinay, like that, with a little attitude, you guys. Beautiful name. And she is here to talk to us about work culture and just kind of culture in general. But I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself. Why don't you tell people kind of a little bit about who you are in essence as a person, and then a little bit of your background, which kind of got you into work culture. And before I let you go, everyone who's watching, you guys know what to do. Post in the comments, where are you guys watching from? And what is one thing that you're grateful for today?
Hey everyone, nice to be here. Thank you for having me on. So my name is Brittinay Lenhart, and so I'm your work culture consultant, and I've been on here on LinkedIn for a while now, trying to get my exposure and get clients to see how important work culture is, because we all know that some people have been in toxic work environments. Some people know that when it's amazing, you can thrive, and it's good for people's mental health as well as just business revenue. So I have clients who, I'm a little nervous, so we're going to get this live situation out.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let me direct you a little bit. So where did you grow up and where do you live now? I think it's always good to give kind of like geographical context, because cultures really, I find, are very tied to physical locations. So the culture over here in Spokane, Washington, I'm sure is quite different than the culture where you're located now, which is?
Now I'm in Las Vegas.
Vegas, nice, love it.
I'm actually from a podunk town not too far from here in Arizona, real small 1,300 people town. And but now I'm here located in Vegas because I was in the military for a long time, and then I finally got out and then relocated to Las Vegas. So I'm happy to be.
Let me ask you a little bit about that. What was it like growing up kind of in such a small town, and what's like some of the impact that it had on you when you left, and then moving into kind of like work culture? Did you learn anything in that town? Did you take anything away from those experiences that impacted you kind of now as an adult?
That's a good question. I think that definitely that old town feel that we have, since it's so small. There's a lot of blue collar work, and so I was raised in a blue collar life, and then I kind of went into that later on, and you just makes you respect the blue collar life, and you can just, when you're living that, you haven't, since I didn't go into the white collar world off the bat, I was able to remember where I came from when I finally did go into the white collar world, I guess. There's a respect I have for it because of where I come from, I guess.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So that kind of leads me into a question. Do you think, I think this is something a lot of people subtly touch on, but no one really talks about it. Do you think that white collar kind of disrespects blue collar work, or do you think that there's a difference and like a negativity towards those two different cultures? I mean, they're essentially different cultures, right?
There absolutely can be. I've seen it on both sides. And that's where, a work culture comes into play, because there are, operational and maintenance side of certain, let's say an aerospace company. You have your pilots that are kind of more white collar or business marketing people, then you still have your mechanics and such. And when everything is cohesive, it's a good, awesome unit. And everyone's working together. They're in the same mission. But there are times where, and I've seen it, where, pilots will look down at mechanics, you're fixing my plane. And it's very disrespectful. And then, of course, there gets that animosity from the maintainer side of things, like, who are you? And then just it gets like this, and then they don't understand, hey, we're all working together to get this plane in the sky and get, A to B. So I've definitely seen it from both sides, but I've seen where that animosity that the maintainers have treated pilots that way when it wasn't deserving. So I've seen it, I guess, from all angles.
Interesting. Let's dive a little bit more into like your pilot experience and everything around aviation. Could you just tell people, like, in a short summary, what was that journey like for you in terms of where you started and where you ended up?
I joined, long story short, in the military when I was 17. I started off as a mechanic on jet engines. And then I cross-trained eventually into flight
Can I
attendant.
just stop you real quick? Wow, that's so cool. Okay, keep going.
Oh, thanks. And then I went and cross-trained into a special duty position with being a flight attendant, because a lot of people don't realize like who flies around on Air Force One and all these other big jets with these politicians. It's actually Air Force members and their flight attendants, and it's an actual special duty. And so I got chosen for that. It was awesome, and I got to go work for the Secretary of Defense, and that was Leon Panetta and Chuck Hagel. They were, it was a really awesome situation. I was flight crew for them, and we went to like 20 plus countries, and it was an amazing experience, seeing all those different cultures everywhere, and just the fly life it's fun time.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about that kind of fly life. So what did that like on a week to week basis look like? How much time were you spending in the air? Did you get to kind of adventure into these countries, or were you working when you got there? What was that like?
So for us being flight attendants, a lot of people don't know that it's not just like a Southwest flight or something like that. We literally go to culinary school. We cook from scratch, like a lot, or we get, really special catered food on these planes, and we're feeding our jet 90 people.
Oh, wow, that's a big jet.
It was a 747.
I was thinking a little one, but no, that's a big workload. So was it just you, or did you have kind of like a crew of flight attendants?
Yeah, we had about 6. Normally on the big missions, we had about 6. And, one person would usually be the DV flight attendant. And you can check this out on YouTube. It's there. And then there was the cooks. Usually it's 2. There's people prepping. It's a whole line of things. And, we have to make sure that, it's like if we have a 7-day mission, you have to have that much food prepped. And it's a lot of physical work. It's not just like, oh, here's your peanuts. It was so much more than that. And then I personally was the flight attendant who had to deal with all the visas, all the passports,
paperwork.
So that was super fun too. If we have to go to Israel one day and somewhere in the Middle East the next, it can get complicated. So it was a good time.
Were you guys doing all of the itinerary and planning around that, or was it something that was kind of handed to you and then you worked around all the scheduling and things like that?
We had people in OSD, that like secretaries, staff that we would have to
mesh with. Mm-hmm. Very cool. So it sounds like, honestly, like a really big team environment. Like everyone had to be working together. So would you say that was kind of a good work culture experience for you, or how would you rate that?
It depended on the crew.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes you would get a crew of people that you just love to work with, and it was like banging things out, and like when we get off the plane, we're happy to just relax and finally take our hats off and do our thing together. But if you had a crew of people that maybe you didn't jive with, the entire trip could just spoil it, which is like, I guess, where work culture comes in. Like it depends on the people and how the the culture is with even a small group of people. So imagine on a bigger scale.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this comment here. I'm going to throw it up. It kind of sounds quite similar to like the teamwork that's required in a hospital. I like that analogy, where everyone has to be working together because you're taking care of the patients, but everyone has really different roles.
Right.
So you mentioned that it depended on the crew. How often were you kind of switching between different crews? Was it every single flight that it was different, or was there kind of like a core crew that you worked with? How did that work?
To make sure I'm not violating any
yes, of course,
stuff, because I'm like having to think about that too. It varied.
Cool. Okay, cool. Absolutely. So going from that experience in the Air Force, what did you do next?
So had an amazing time did 8 years, and then had some life things happen. I was like, you know what? I just want a fresh start. And so I got out and immediately went into military contracting. So it's like I was still close to my people, but had my freedom of being a civilian. And then, long story short, went that military contracting, or just contracting for the government in general. I went aerospace, more NASA involved, and ended up working for a privatized company that was a contractor, and a CEO that was super, super toxic. And I actually was only there 7 months, and finally I was starting to literally I had an anxiety in the past, or still maybe now, but I deal with it differently. And I used to take medication.
We all have at least some amount of anxiety in different situations. Like no one's calm all the time, right? So certainly I imagine you were probably in that situation that was causing you the anxiety pretty often.
Right. And it was just like, and I was trying to be more holistic with my therapy, if you will, at that time. But I was getting to the point where I still had that, a fallback if it was getting too high. And working there made me like want to take medication on a regular basis. That's how bad it was. And I'm like, this isn't not how things should be, like at all. So I quit because my mental health was more important. And the culture there was so toxic. That company is no longer. So if that is not
well, I
enough.
want to definitely commend you on putting your mental health first. I think that's a wonderful lesson. And you guys, look, she's doing great now. So if you're in a position where you feel like you're in kind of a toxic work culture, we're both giving you the okay to leave that place. No matter what concerns you have around your finances, your health and your mental health come first. And honestly, the finances will come, especially if you make a positive decision for yourself like that. I'd love for you to, as much as you're comfortable, talk about what made it so toxic. What about it was causing you so much anxiety, and what was the dynamic between people that was just clearly not working?
What's crazy is that place, there was a lot of engineers and scientists for the most part, and a few other career fields. And there was a lot of amazing people within the company. They were super smart. They put a lot of things on the ISS, amazing, smart people. But the CEO treated his people like pawns. He didn't listen. For example, there was an engineer that was like, we can't do something the way you want because math and science, like it literally is not going to work. And this person, not to get too many details in, he had no background in the STEM field. Right. And he would just be like, he was so upset with the fact that someone told him no. He was like, get out. And he fired pretty much the entire engineering department the same day. And we just watched everyone leave. And it was just like, what in the heck is going on? This, and it just kept happening. Entire departments. And it was just like, over what? Like, you had these amazing people who wanted that. So the mission was there. Everyone was aligned with the mission. But the problem was there was a lack of values and a lack of respect for people.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. So you had the people, but you didn't have the context for which everyone was working in. I'd love to ask you, was it language? Was it energy and attitude, or was it a combination really of those things?
It was a combination. Like the CEO, it was a smaller-ish company, like 180-ish people, so it wasn't too big. But he would like scream at people, like spit in their face, scream like that.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I call that acting like a child. So basically, not having adult conversational behavior.
Right.
And I think that brings up for me one of the things that I really, really believe in, and personally I've seen in my own work culture that I've been trying to create, is that communication style is almost more important than anything. And in fact, I believe communication drives all work culture. Not only how you're communicating, but what you're communicating. And if you're not communicating what is safe and what's okay and what's not okay, how is anyone supposed to know? I think employees living in a state of fear is so bad, not only for productivity, but certainly for morale, creativity. Like, you're not going to be creative if you're scared. You're going to be in that salvation kind of mindset. Yep. And with my first employee that I had, one of the big mistakes that I realized I was making was when they were doing something wrong. And this was more like, not I thought it was wrong, but they were actually doing something wrong. And telling how I told them and what I told them, I thought I was doing a really good job. I wasn't yelling. I would say, hey, you did this wrong. I'd like you to do it this way. But I didn't give them a reason as to why they needed to do it this way. Like, it needs to be done this way to get done right. But I didn't say getting it done right has this effect or is going to impact the company or impact people in this way. And I think tying that impact and the values into what your actual physical activities are or the decisions that you're making is so important. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what is it that you do now to help people with work culture? Because I know that your business now centers around that. What are some specific things that you help people either realize and evaluate or implement and improve?
one of the things is onboarding processes, because culture starts from day zero. And I say day zero because you haven't even brought the person on yet. You've put the job out there, and how you even craft the job, that you're trying to bring people in, that's day zero. How you're talking about that, how you've drafted that, that's where that really starts. So that entire process is something that I help with, because you want to make sure you're also getting good people and
Right.
weeding out the bad. So that's one of the services I offer, because then once they get on, you want to make sure that doesn't have to be boring. Like most people, onboarding, it's going to be death by PowerPoint or whatnot. It's really like having, if they can, the CEO or, executives come in and be like, hey, this is our mission. We're so happy to have you here. And like just making people feel welcome, aligning them again with the missions and values that needs to drive throughout the rest of a person's time there. And that, which brings me to retention. Sometimes people have retention issues. It looks like a revolving door because they have cultural issues. And so when I do deep dives with companies, I have a survey that I do, and a lot of people know, pulse surveys. I call mine cadence survey because I want mine to be different and military related. And I'm able to really understand from the questions that I personally put into those, as well as, it can be customized as well, really understand what's going on that usually people are too scared to tell management. And then I get to be the voice for them to, remedy maybe a bad apple. There's a person that just keeps getting brought up. This person is, making our lives hell or whatever. I'm able to be that voice for them to then possibly help them change, not necessarily remove them, but maybe remedy the situation with leadership training, which is another thing that I provide as well, because it's really important to have the right people in the right positions in terms of leadership and management.
Absolutely. I think one of the things you just touched on there is really important, I think, for employees to understand is a lot of times leadership is unaware that they're being toxic. They think they're focused on different things than what the employees are really getting communicated and kind of perceiving on their end. And so I think I've definitely experienced a couple times talking to, because I think what I do is a little bit in a similar sense. Sometimes I always start, what is your company's mission, like your core mission, and what are your core values? And oftentimes companies don't have those things set out. And when they don't, it's almost impossible to really have good work culture, because how can your employees believe in something if they don't even know what that thing is to believe in? And our businesses have really transformed, like, thankfully, thank God, they've transformed from more than just a place where you come to work, but a place where you come to be who you are and contribute yourself, not just your skills, but to put everything that's wonderful about you as a human being into that company. And that's what makes, I think, truly great companies really great, is that the employees are not just showing up and putting in their skills. They're showing up and putting in their heart and their soul, and like everything that they care about aligns with what the business cares about. And it makes such a cohesive, like almost a magic that starts to exist. So exactly,
Yes.
yeah. And it's completely transformative and life-changing. But a lot of people have just never even thought of it. They go, oh, I thought I knew what my mission was until someone asked me, because I feel driven. Being driven and having a defined mission or defined core values is different than feeling things inside of you, where you're like, I feel like I'm a good person. I feel like I'm a good company doing good things. That's so different than saying I have defined exactly what those things are, because once you define them, put them on paper, you can no longer deny them or ever go against them. They're always going to stare you in the face, and be, I think, a kind of like a filter for not only your decisions, but then how you approach problems. Because guess what? As a business, there's a lot of problems. Like, that's all business is, right? Is solving loads of problems and ongoing problems. And so being able to determine how you solve those problems in a really cohesive and, I would say, consistent manner is what workplace culture is all about to me. So I'd love, maybe, could you give a couple examples of times when, maybe not times, but situations where you were able to implement some type of either onboarding or any of the other processes that you implement to have a result? Like what have you seen happen when you're working with these businesses and you help them with their job description, or you help them with this specific component?
I was asked by a client to they already had a survey that they had done, but they're like, we need data analysis on this and someone who understands work culture. Could you do this for us and then draft up a professional PowerPoint? And I was like, money, let's go. And, it was like 60 employees with, 30 different questions. That's, a lot of data to analyze. And, I was seeing trends and patterns, of course, and I was able to, take that quantitative data, put it in a PowerPoint and be like, not just be like, here's the data and with some pie charts and call it a day, but actually like bring my heart into it. Like I'm seeing that there's communication issues within your organization and they want to be heard or this and that. And I was able to give an executive debrief prior to giving them their PowerPoint that they could then go share, by letting the executive team understand the issues that they were having. And then they had at least a self-awareness from the beginning to be open-minded enough to take in the constructive criticism.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing for me, having those employees.
No, go ahead. Yeah. So I was just going to ask, so it sounds like really most of the issues always center around communication to some degree. Would you say in general, it's people not communicating at all, or is it people communicating and it's a miscommunication in the communication where they're trying to get across a point and either someone is not hearing it or they're hearing it but misinterpreting what the original person means?
If I was to say I saw a trend, it would be a lack of transparency, the communication that they're not getting.
Okay. Oh, so things people are assuming people to do, but not explicitly telling them.
Or, hoarding information, and that then expecting people to know what they don't know, kind of like you were touching on earlier. So a lack of transparency is a problem. Then, like you said, the way people communicate their message. Sometimes people have, and I preach this all the time, a lack of emotional intelligence.
Right.
There's a way that you can broach a subject. Like if someone's wrong, you don't have to, drill sergeant yell at them. There's a way that you can approach a situation that will,
hit home with them more solidly. Absolutely. So one of the things I just quickly want to touch on with that is, and this is something I've learned relatively recently, is that people interpret words like a word you say. When I say my mission, someone else might think purpose, right? So using a cohesive language within your company, I think, is really important to the point where everyone says mission or everyone says purpose and understands what that means. Because if within a company, one person's using the word mission and one person's using the word purpose, there can be just confusion about what anyone really means when they're communicating, even about the exact same thing. And so one of the things that I've been working on implementing is coming up with like my company dictionary, let's call it, of like, here are the words we use and here's what they mean to us. And for me, that's been so helpful in terms of working with my virtual assistant, who is from the Philippines, has very good English, but within the time I've been working with her, her English, because of the language I'm saying, here's the specific words we use, and here's why, because this word makes people feel fuzzy warm, and this word makes people feel this particular way. Her English has gotten like better than most of the people I know. Like now she's better at communicating than most of the Americans I talk to. And so I think it doesn't matter where people start with communication. If you teach them in the right way and you give them the proper tools, like we're built to be communicators. Like the fact that people can learn like whatever 15 different languages. Sometimes I meet these people and they know like 12 languages and I'm like, holy cow. But it's because people in general have, I think, a proclivity towards language and communicating. We love to connect through communication and through words. And being able to facilitate that as a business is such a powerful thing, because words are deeply tied to our emotions. And once you can have everyone's emotions be on the same level or plane, then there's a magic that starts to happen. You guys know about it in sports. You can see it in like groups of musicians working together. Any level of team can communicate on a level that creates this kind of sense of magic. And I'd love to see more of that in the workplace. So do you have kind of any last bits of advice or things that you really want to get out to people, like leadership teams? Because really it comes from the leadership down. Yes, employees can have a strong ability, I think, to communicate and make change within an organization if they understand how to communicate and approach certain people. But really, it should always start with the leaders of a company. So talking to them or talking to anyone else, what are some either tips or advice or just some things you want to leave people with today?
A big thing is 360-degree feedback. And that is, usually you have a feedback with your employee, even if it's initial, like, this is what I expect of you. And then people don't realize, hey, boss, this is what I expect of you. And
yes.
And people need to be receptive to that. These leaders or managers need to be receptive to what an employee expects from them. Like, maybe they have a career trajectory that they're on and they need your help with. You need to help them with that. That is your job.
Yeah.
So, and then feedback as well, just in general, like, hey, I didn't like the way that, you handled this situation. People need to just have that ability to be open-minded and like communicate professionally and appropriately. And it's almost, there's like business love languages, if you will. Not everyone is going to deal with things the same way. So you need to know your employees personally in different ways, but definitely.
Oh, I love that. That's a great one. I'm going to iterate on that. So it comes back to the point of everyone kind of initially communicates differently. And the more you get to know an employee, probably I would say even outside of work, because that's when we really let loose with our natural communication style. And that's probably why, social hours and social time for businesses is really effective and important, is because you get to start to learn the real language that your employees respond to and already are using in a context that's very authentic and real, where they're not worried about like their job necessarily. Like, they're worried about hanging out and having fun in that social time. And then it also reminded me of a TikTok video I saw recently. There's a trend going on right now. It's called You Could Have Been Nicer to Me. So basically the trend is you take your phone and you film someone and you just randomly say, hey, I think you could have been nicer to me today. And you see how they respond. And this one video I saw was they were on a Zoom call. It was like two employees on a Zoom call with their CEO. And they did this. They went, we thought that you could have been nicer to us today. And she was so confused at first. She went, do you mean in that email? and they went, well, we just thought like you could have been nicer, because you're just supposed to repeat it with no extra info. And she pauses and like thinks for a minute. She goes, well, first I want to say, like, thank you guys for like bringing that up. Like, I really appreciate that you're willing to give me that feedback. And I guess I'll go back and look at it. And like, I'll definitely look at it and see, like, I'll try and see what you're talking about. And I was like, this is an awesome CEO.
Right.
But like, I think that's a classic example of like, you have to be open to feedback, even when you don't understand where it's coming from. You have to be receptive and be able to reflect on, is there something I did that I'm not even aware of? Because we can't possibly be aware of everything all the time. And as human beings, we're all going to make mistakes. Even if you are aware all the time, you're still going to make a mistake. You're going to have a bad day. You're going to, whatever it is. And that feedback and having your employees feel comfortable with giving you that feedback is, to me, really the glue. And it's not just, I realize it's not just saying, hey guys, you can tell me the feedback, because they have to really feel it. They have to feel safe before they're ever going to actually give you that feedback. And that takes, I think, time. That takes regular communication, letting them know that in different ways, and trying to find, again, that kind of like love language you talked about, that really hits home to them, where they get, oh, I can tell you anything and it'll be okay, and actually you'll value it. Now I get it. And as a CEO, as a leader in any company, you will know when that kind of aha moment happens because one, you'll feel it.
Mhm.
Two, they will actually start to tell you things. Every single employee has feedback to give their bosses, whether it's good feedback or bad feedback. If an employee is telling you nothing, I would say that that's a sign that you need to have a little bit of work in your workplace, work on your workplace culture. And it's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean we're not demonizing here to say you're bad if you have bad workplace culture. It just means you have something you could improve on that makes your business even better than it already is. So how would people get in touch with you? You're definitely, as far as all the people I've talked to in the past 6 months, probably the most qualified to help people in terms of workplace culture. So I think anyone who's even interested to know about how would they go about evaluating their workplace culture should absolutely get in touch with you. How would they do that?
You could either go to workcultureconsultant.com or follow me here on LinkedIn. I have a lot of content I push out, and it's a great way to get a hold of me there as well.
All right, I'm going to put that up in so everyone can see it. Workplace culture, was it?
Just workcultureconsultant.com.
Mm-hmm. All right, throw that up there. You guys check her out. Also, again, you can hit her up on LinkedIn. But definitely, we should all, if you care about your workplace culture, it is something you should consistently measure and evaluate. I was just listening to Gary Vee's Marketing for the Now, and they made a really great, clear point about it. You look at your revenue numbers and your expenses every month, don't you? It's because you really care about them. And anything that you really care about in your business, you need to consistently and regularly look at, because if you don't, it will slip, it will detriment and not be as good. We have to always be evolving. We have to always be conscious and aware of what's happening with our businesses on every level that we deem important and we deem valuable. So you guys, please hit her up. This is something I'm going to be hitting her up, asking, some things that I can do. And I highly suggest you guys do the same. Hope you guys got a lot of value out of this one. If you think that, other people out there need to hear this information, make sure to share the live. This is also going to be on the replay on my page afterwards. So if you missed a little bit of it and you want to watch the whole thing, just go to my LinkedIn page. You can also go to my YouTube channel and it will be there available for you guys.